Oh, at least 41 flights were affected by jet fuel shortages at OR Tambo last week. Transport Minister Fikile Mbalula says 32 of those flights were domestic, 8 were international and 1 was regional. The minister conducting an oversight visit at the airport earlier today. Following that for us, eNCA's Heidi Giokos is there joining us now. And hello to you, Heidi. And I think let's not sugarcoat this. What do we mean by a technical glitch? Some people saying it's not a good enough answer.
Yes, and I can understand why some people will say it's not a good enough answer, because a couple of weeks ago we were receiving reports that there is a jet fuel shortage, and eNCA was very quick to say that there is no such thing, and that the situation is being put under control. And a couple of weeks later, just after Christmas, we are told that there is another fuel issue, and this seems to be the problem here. So last week, on the 28th of December, we do understand that around 3 a.m. there was an issue with getting fuel out of the fuel valve, and the emergency system did not kick in on time. And at about 3 in the morning, they then decided to try and find a different way to get the fuel out into the aircraft. That did not work, and this is when they had to basically manually get tankers out and fuel aircraft. What we do know is that 41 aircraft, or airlines rather, were affected, flights were affected, the majority of it being domestic flights, which of course explains the fact that you had many passengers stranded here at OR Tambo International Airport, many trying to get to their various destinations, and it basically took a whole day to recover those flights that were impacted, because especially with domestic flights, it's very difficult to make up the time or to recover the time, because there's certain time frames that aircraft need to take off. And because that did not happen between the hours of 6 and 9 a.m., it had a knock-on effect for the rest of the day. But according to the Minister of Transport, Fikile Mbalula, as well as the CEO of eNCA, they have expressed that the situation will not happen again, and that they have put contingency and mitigating measures in place to ensure that there is no repeat. I asked the question about who dropped the ball and how this even happened in the first place. Is it an issue of a lack of maintenance? Is it an issue of not enough parts to repair these issues when they do arise? And we were told that that's not necessarily the case. But let's listen to what the minister had to say about this particular matter.
In the last week, this airport was confronted with the challenge of a technical fault between the fuel storage facility and the main hydrant system, which impacted the refueling of aircraft. The technical issue was as a result of the main supply valve supplying fuel to the aprons not opening, resulting in rotational delays to domestic and international departures. eNCA was swift in its response and immediately implemented a contingency measure, deploying a tanker to refuel aircraft. The subsequent delays affected 41 flights, 32 of which were domestic, 8 international and 1 regional flight. The swift manner with which eNCA dealt with the challenge minimized the impact and ensured that flight schedules returned to normal within a reasonable time.
So Heidi, the timing of this couldn't have been worse either. I don't think anybody would forget the fact this happened over the festive season. There were perhaps connecting flights, there were hotels that were booked, there were plans that were made, etc., etc. So just help me understand the infuriation of what could have been thousands of passengers, and now it's been rectified, it seems. So what does flight capacity look like right now?
Yes, so we actually did ask the question about how much this possibly could have cost eNCA, airlines and everybody affected because of the 41 flights that were impacted due to this fuel valve accident that happened on the 28th of December. And eNCA says that they are still counting possibly the losses, and they would only be able to indicate that impact possibly at the end of January, when they do a full assessment of the festive season and how that unfolded. But one can imagine 41 flights, 32 of them being domestic flights impacted. Our reporter Moloko Moloto was here on the 28th speaking to passengers and airlines, and there was much frustration because people plan and you don't expect something like this to happen. Also, many of them expressing the lack of communication, that they had no idea. Had they been told prior, they wouldn't even have arrived at the airport, and that's often what you find. But when an accident occurs, it's very difficult to ascertain the seriousness of this. You also asked about flight capacity, which I think is a very important one, because we have seen flight prices, especially domestically, skyrocketing, and this possibly has to do with the fact that we don't have many domestic airlines anymore. Recently we saw Comair going into liquidation. Mango is not flying. SA Express is not flying. So you have a limited amount of airlines able to provide those flight seats to many travelers, that there's more of a demand than there is of a supply, and basic economics says that the prices are possibly going to go up. But according to AXA, there's been an 80% recovery, so almost at 2019 levels. Of course, after the COVID-19 pandemic, aviation was brought to its knees. So there is some positive news with that recovery, and hopefully airlines in this new year will be able to bring on board more capacity, more seats, which is some good news for travelers, because that means flight prices will most likely go down, Gareth.
Yeah, it's going to be good news as well. Imagine how angry you must be knowing what domestic flight tickets cost you arrive at the airport, and then you can't even get on the aircraft after paying all that money as well. So they must have been furious. I saw those updates with Moloko Moloto over the weekend. But Heidi, thank you very much indeed for bringing us up to speed for all the travelers out there.